Welcome, bienvenidos. I'm Richard Toscan, Vice Provost for International Affairs at Virginia Commonwealth University and Dean of the School of the Arts at VCU. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2009 Hamad bin Khalifa Symposium in Islamic Art, and diverse are their hues, color in Islamic art and culture. I express my special appreciation to the Chancellor of the University of Cordoba for hosting us in their marvelous hall and for long assistance in the planning of this event. The relationship between VCU and the University of Cordoba was created by President Emeritus Eugene P. Trani, who is with us today, and I would like to acknowledge him. With me is Dr. McKenna Brown, Executive Director of International Education at VCU. The symposium was conceived and established by His Highness Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, the Emir of Qatar, in recognition of VCU's role as the founding university and education city in Doha, Qatar. It is His Highness's intention that Virginia Commonwealth University and its VCU School of the Arts in Qatar present the Hamad bin Khalifa Symposia every 2 years, alternating between Doha, Qatar, and other significant international venues. The Hamad bin Khalifa Symposia are made possible by the Qatar Foundation for Education, Science, and Community Development.
Good evening, everyone. Muy buenas noches a todos. Welcome, bienvenidos a este evento. Me da mucho placer presentarles a ustedes el rector magnífico de la Universidad de Córdoba, el doctor José Manuel Roldán Nogueras.
Thank you, Robert. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a real pleasure for me as representative, as president of the University of Cordoba, to be you all here with us. This is a real satisfaction, and please be welcome to our institution. A couple of years ago, working with the collaboration with Virginia Commonwealth University, I visited Dr. Eugene Trani, and we both considered the possibility of holding this Congress in Cordoba. Dr. Trani, I guess we made a good choice. Thank you, Dr. Trani, for your help, for your collaboration with us. And thank you also, Dr. Rao, for going on with this collaboration. And thank you, of course, to you, Robert, for your friendship and for your work together. The University of Cordoba is really honored opening its doors to you, and particularly in Cordoba, our city, which, as you know, is a melting pot of cultures, civilizations, religions. So I guess this is a good place to hold this Congress. And also I'd like to acknowledge to Qatar Foundation for being here. So thank you very much for coming. Enjoy our city and be welcome to our university. Thank you very much.
Alison Vanstone, Dean of VCU School of the Arts in Qatar.
Good evening. I'm excited to be here in Cordoba and to have its beauty and charm captivate all of us as we've been walking the streets this last day. I'm also delighted to represent Virginia Commonwealth University in Qatar. as we join forces with VCU School of the Arts and the Qatar Foundation to present the Symposium on Islamic Art. Some of our VCU Qatar alumni are here with us today in the audience, as well as some of our outstanding scholarship students. And we're thrilled that they're here to have the opportunity to learn from world leaders in Islamic art. This hands-on learning experience provides a unique and memorable experience for them as well as all of us. I would like to thank His Highness Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa and Her Highness Sheikh Moza bint Nasser Al Misnad for their vision and for their support. I would also like to extend my gratitude to Sheila Blair and Jonathan Bloom for bringing together scholars from around the world and publishing the symposia proceedings so research will be available to all of us. Finally, thank you to the many organizers behind the scenes who have been working to ensure that we have another successful symposium, and I look forward to meeting many of you in the next few days. Thank you.
Please welcome Drs. Jonathan Bloom and Sheila Blair, the Hamad bin Khalifa co-chairs of Islamic Art at Virginia Commonwealth University.
It's a real pleasure to be here. And I'm speaking for both Jonathan and I right now because you're going to hear a lot more from Jonathan in a few minutes, so I get the first bit. It's a pleasure to be in Cordova. It's a pleasure to be in this smashing neo-Mamluk building. I can't imagine a better place to hold this, especially a symposium on color. And you'll notice I'm dressed in black and white because you, the audience, are the color. I don't know, except for a museum opening, of another gathering where we have gotten together as many people, anywhere, at any time, to talk about Islamic art. So it is to you that we owe our thanks, and we wish you a very, very good symposium. See you soon.
Please welcome Dr. Abdullah Al Thani, Vice President for Education of the Qatar Foundation.
Good evening. Dr. Roldan Negoras, Mayor Okena Rabadan, President Rao, Vice President Toskin, Dean Van Stone, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third biennial Hamad bin Khalifa Symposium of Islamic Art. I know many of you have come from far away, but also I hope some of you are residents of Cordoba. I also recognize quite a few who, like me, have come here from Qatar. The previous two symposia, in Richmond in 2005 and Doha in 2007, both explored the new avenues and produced new ideas in a number of areas. And when I look at the program for this event, I'm impressed by the stature of the speakers and intrigued by the themes to be discussed. The organizers are to be congratulated on bringing together so many specialists in the use of color in Islamic art and culture. I look forward to hearing contributions ranging from the medieval to the modern, featuring experts in art, architecture, literature, and philosophy. We are very privileged to be meeting this time in Cordoba, capital of Muslim Spain, which contains many significant monuments of Islamic art and architecture. I find this a very appropriate venue. The city's history and geography connected with both East and West, making it a cultural bridge, something very central to the concept of this symposium. Qatar Foundation is itself a cultural bridge, and I wish to say how proud we are to be collaborating with Virginia Commonwealth University School of Arts on yet another wonderful project, and by extension with the University of Cordoba. I believe that together, Qatar Foundation and VCU are playing a leading role in the renaissance of art and design in the Middle East. In the space of 11 years, VCU Qatar has become a premier design school of the region. This year, the school has added a fourth major of its Bachelor of Fine Art program in painting and printmaking, and it has launched its Masters of Fine Art program. Its graduates are putting Qatar on the map as a design hub where innovations draw from and reflect our rich regional heritage. VCU Qatar is also contributing to the birth of a research base in Qatar through the Center for Research in Design and other initiatives. It is making a direct contribution to our community through organization of cultural events such as exhibitions, conferences, and seminars. VCU Qatar will again host this symposium in 2 years' time in Doha. As we begin this event, I wish to thank the city and the University of Cordoba for graciously offering us these beautiful surroundings and for their warm hospitality. I also thank Virginia Commonwealth University for this fruitful collaboration, which I know will continue under the presidency of Dr. Michael Rao. My thanks as well to Sheila Blair and Jonathan Bloom, joint holders of Hamad bin Khalifa Endowed Chair of Islamic Art at VCU, for leading this symposium series, as well as to everyone from VCU School of Arts in Richmond, VCU Qatar, who has been involved in organization of this exciting meeting. Thank you very much.
Damas y caballeros, ladies and gentlemen, por favor, please, una cálida bienvenida, a warm welcome for el excelentísimo señor alcalde, the most excellent mayor de la ciudad de Córdoba, el señor Andrés Ocaña.
Excelentísimas, ilustrísimas autoridades académicas, compañeras de corporación, alcalde de Montoro, amigas y amigos. En primer lugar, permítame unas afectuosas palabras de bienvenida a quienes han acudido hasta Córdoba desde diversos países de todo el mundo para participar en este simposio bajo el título Diversidad y sus matices, el color en el arte y la cultura islámica. Asimismo, quiero también expresar mi felicitación a los responsables de su organización y del impulso de una iniciativa de estas características, el análisis en profundidad y desde una perspectiva multidisciplinar de la cultura islámica a través de sus manifestaciones artísticas. Mi enhorabuena, por tanto, a la Universidad de Virginia, a la VCU Qatar y a la Fundación Qatar como principales artífices de la puesta en marcha de este simposio internacional. Una enhorabuena que deseo hacer extensiva, como no, a la Universidad de Córdoba como institución que ha canalizado los esfuerzos y los medios para hacer posible la celebración de este evento en nuestra ciudad. De hecho, con motivo de este tercer simposio sobre arte islámico, Córdoba quiere agradecerle y manifestarles nuestra inmensa satisfacción por habernos convertido en la ciudad que la acoge, tras las 2 ediciones anteriores celebradas en el Estadio de Virginia y en la ciudad de Doha. Una elección, la de Córdoba, que no resulta ni mucho menos casual, sino que responde fielmente, como todos y todas ustedes conocen, a nuestra propia historia, a la esplendorosa huella que la cultura islámica dejó en esta tierra durante siglos y a los irrompibles lazos que vincularán para siempre a nuestros pueblos. Han llegado a una ciudad a la que el mundo entero reconoce hoy por las que han sido desde tiempos inmemoriales nuestra seña de identidad. un lugar de encuentro, de diálogo y de convivencia entre las diversas culturas que una vez se asentaron en este enclave privilegiado del sur de Europa. Una de estas culturas, sin ningún género de duda, es la cultura islámica, sin cuya referencia sería sencillamente imposible explicar ni entender la Córdoba, ciudad patrimonio de la humanidad, que puede sentirse orgullosa de este pasado histórico. Y cuando hablo de cultura islámica, lo hago en el sentido más amplio de la expresión. Lo que Córdoba es y representa en la historia del pensamiento político, filosófico, el conocimiento científico, la creación artística o, en otras palabras, la que ha sido nuestra aportación fundamental a la construcción de la Europa y el mundo que conocemos, cuenta entre sus nombres propios con personalidades imprescindibles nacidas en el seno de esta cultura islámica. Personalidades en todas las facetas del desarrollo y la evolución humana, cuya vida y obra se enmarca en la ciudad al mismo tiempo que Córdoba no puede explicarse sin ellos. Parte esencial de este legado tiene que ver con el patrimonio, con el arte, con la riqueza monumental que hoy sigue siendo memoria, registro incomparable de la presencia islámica en nuestra tierra. De ahí la importancia, el absoluto acierto de que este foro de estudiosos y expertos en arte islámico se dé cita en la ciudad de Córdoba. Una ciudad que, sobre la base de los elementos que le he ido detallando, nuestra identidad basada en el encuentro, el diálogo y el cruce de culturas, trabaja con ilusión y espléndida garantía para convertirse en capital europea de la cultura en 2016. Se trata de un proyecto del que podemos afirmar con satisfacción se siente cómplice el conjunto de la sociedad cordobesa. Un proyecto que cuenta en la actualidad con decenas de miles de adhesiones pertenecientes a todo tipo de entidades nacionales e internacionales y a título individual con el apoyo de prestigiosos representantes del ámbito del arte y de la cultura en todo el mundo. Nuestra candidatura a la capitalidad europea de la cultura en 2016 se propone, lógicamente, un reconocimiento de máximo nivel al que ha sido nuestro papel en la historia, pero es también un proyecto que, ante todo, quiere hacer valer nuestra propia experiencia y trasladar un mensaje a sociedades y pueblos de todo el mundo. Es posible la convivencia pacífica basada en la tolerancia, el respeto, el diálogo y la igualdad. Es posible una convivencia pacífica basada en la interculturalidad, en el acercamiento y el enriquecimiento mutuo que supone el intercambio de culturas, costumbres diversas y formas distintas de ser y de entender el mundo. Este es el pilar fundamental que sustenta nuestro proyecto para optar a la capitalidad cultural de 2016 y del que les invitamos a participar desde este instante. Me resta solo reiterarles una cálida bienvenida a esta ciudad de la que espero disfruten y conserven un bello recuerdo, no solo en el sentido profesional que les ha traído, sino también como experiencia personal. De nuevo también mi enhorabuena a los organizadores y de modo muy especial a las personas que de la Universidad de Córdoba han dedicado su esfuerzo y buen hacer para hacer posible este simposio en nuestra ciudad. A todas y a todos, bienvenidos, buen trabajo y muchas gracias.
Please welcome Dr. Michael Rao, President of Virginia Commonwealth University.
Good evening. Buenas tardes. Monica and I are very, very pleased to be here with all of you together in the wonderful city of Córdoba to welcome everyone to the Hamad bin Khalifa Symposium in Islamic Art and Culture. Señor Rector, magnífico, excelentísimo señor alcalde de Córdoba, autoridades y colegas. Es muy grato para mí poder darles a todos la bienvenida al Simposio Hamad bin Khalifa de Arte y Cultura Islámicos en esta maravillosa ciudad de Córdoba. This is the third biennial symposium, and I am very, very grateful for the range of countries from which our speakers are coming that include Egypt, France, India, Iran, Ireland, Lebanon, Spain, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Este es el tercer simposio bianual y estoy muy impresionado por el gran número de países representados por los diversos ponentes procedentes de Egipto, Francia, India, Irán, Irlanda, Líbano, España, el Reino Unido y los Estados Unidos. I'm also very, very pleased with our association with Yale University Press, which will be publishing the proceedings of this great symposia. Me complace también nuestra colaboración con la casa editorial de la Universidad de Yale, la cual publica los anales del simposio. You know, not a week goes by for me that I'm not impressed by the colleagues of the faculty of the School of the Arts, whose level of quality and commitment to quality serves as a reference for every one of us at VCU. They are indeed a model to demonstrate the level of the the highest level of expectation that we have for the entire university, and it represents very much where we will be headed as a university in the future. No pasa ni una semana sin que me sienta impresionado por mis colegas, los profesores de nuestra Facultad de Arte, cuyo nivel de calidad debe servir de referencia para elevar el listón del resto de facultades. Ellos son el modelo hacia el que se dirige nuestra universidad. I would like to take advantage of this moment to recognize a very special person in the room, Professor Eugene Trani, who is President Emeritus of VCU, for his important outreach internationally, for his vision internationally, and for his idea to hold the symposium in Córdoba, which today becomes a reality. He and his wife Lois join us this evening. I'll say it in Spanish and then we'll. Aprovecho este momento para reconocer al Eugene Trani, Presidente Emeritus de VCU, por su importante extensión internacional y su idea de celebrar este simposio en Córdoba, que hoy se hace realidad. Él y su esposa Lois nos acompañan esta tarde. Lois and Jean, please stand. Monica and I certainly hope that you enjoy what will absolutely be a very exciting presentation of research in the field over the next few days. Espero que disfruten de lo que promete ser una conferencia muy emocionante sobre las investigaciones del arte islámico durante los próximos 3 días. On behalf of VCU and the Qatar Foundation, I am very pleased to have this opportunity and privileged to thank our partner, the University of Córdoba, for all of their support and close collaborations in so many areas. And, Señor Rector, we enthusiastically embrace our great partnership and look forward to many, many years in the future. En nombre de VCU y la Fundación Qatar, agradezco a la Universidad de Córdoba todo el apoyo prestado y especialmente su estrecha colaboración en todo ámbito. And once again, I say to everyone here, it is my pleasure, a warm, warm welcome. Así que repito a todos los presentes, bienvenidos.
I am pleased to declare the opening of the third biennial Hamad bin Khalifa Symposium in Islamic Art. For those of you who have just arrived, there are plenty of seats if you'd like to move in so you don't have to stand through the event. The coordinators of the Hamad bin Khalifa Symposia are Dr. Sheila Blair and Jonathan M. Bloom. They hold the Hamad bin Khalifa Chair in Islamic Art in the Department of Art History, School of the Arts at Virginia Commonwealth University. They also hold the Norma Jean Calderwood Chair of Islamic and Asian Art at Boston College. Doctors Blair and Bloom collaborate as co-authors on many of their books, and these have become standard references in the field of Islamic art. Their work has been recognized by the CAA Mori Award, the Albert Hourani Book Award of the Middle East Studies Association, twice by the British Kuwait Friendship Society Book Prize, and the Bahari Prize for the Best Book on Persian Civilization. Publishers of their books are among the leaders in the field, including Yale University Press, Oxford University Press, Edinburgh University Press, and the Noor Foundation with Oxford University for work on the Nasser D. Khalili collection of Islamic art. In 2008, Dr. Blair won the Book of the Year Prize from the Islamic Republic of Iran for Islamic calligraphy, which is being translated into Persian. Dr. Bloom's book, Arts of the City Victorious, Islamic Art and Architecture in Fatimid North Africa and Egypt, was published at the end of 2007 in honor of the 50th Jubilee of His Highness Karim Aga Khan. Together, they co-edited the 3-volume Grove Encyclopedia of Islamic Art and Architecture for Oxford University Press in 2009, and their book, The Art and Architecture of Islam, 1250 to 1800, is being translated into Arabic and will be published shortly in Baghdad. As organizers of the Hamad bin Khalifa Symposium of Islamic Art, Drs. Blair and Bloom also serve as editors of the publications drawn from the symposia, published by Yale University Press for international distribution. The first of these, the Proceedings of the 2007 Symposia, has just been published by Yale, Rivers of Paradise, Water of Islamic Art and Culture, and this publication will be available later during our days at the symposium. Please welcome Dr. Jonathan Bloom, who will do the joint presentation this evening.
Yep, we're fine. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests. It's a great pleasure to be here. I have to say that when Sheila and I first came to Cordova in 1977, we were students with backpacks. We arrived at the old train station, not on the high-speed train. We spent the night on the train because we were saving money. And we went into a cafe and had a coffee and a little something else first thing in the morning. And then we went off to see the Mezquita. And I don't think in my wildest dreams I could ever imagine that I would be standing here today. So it is a great pleasure to be in this beautiful city and see all of you here. Tonight, we're going to present, and I mean we, this is very much a joint presentation, although I'm standing up here. It would be too confusing if she would stand there. We're presenting an introduction and overview to the many different ideas that our illustrious speakers will address in the coming days. In this way, we hope to get you thinking and talking, and so that you'll have many questions to ask our speakers, not only during the question and answer periods, but also during the many breaks that we're going to have, because we believe that this is a symposium, which comes, of course, from the idea of a party, of a way where people come together to talk and discuss. This isn't only about people standing in front of the room, but people talking to each other. So this is a wonderful place to do this. Everybody remarks on the colorful nature of Islamic art, but quite frankly, rarely do people talk about it. From the fabled blue domes of Iran to the luminous miniature paintings of Behzad, Persian miniatures, color is a distinctive feature of virtually all the arts created in the Islamic lands over the last 14 centuries. From the brilliantly colored Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, the first example of Islamic architecture, to the tiled mosques of 19th century Iran. Famous buildings throughout the Islamic lands are known by color, from the White Mosque in Ramla in Palestine and the Green Mosque in Bursa in Turkey, to the Blue Mosque in Tabriz, or even the Red Fort in Agra in India. Muslim art has even transformed such innately monochrome media as metalwork with colorful inlays in other metals. Many of the color words that we use in English and Spanish and French and German and other come from Arabic and other Middle Eastern languages, whether the word orange from the Arabic naranj for the fruit, or azure, which comes from the Persian lazvard, from lapis lazuli, meaning lapis lazuli. Although some scholars have begun to explore the roles of color in European art, few, if any, scholars have considered the roles of color in Islamic art and culture. And that is the purpose of the symposium you've come here to attend. These Hamad bin Khalifa symposia are designed to address large questions in Islamic art that tend to be ignored because they're so obvious. We remember starting to study the arts of the Islamic lands nearly 40 years ago and hearing about how colorful it was. Publishing and teaching being what they were in those days, color plates in books were still rare and usually not very good. The slides our professors showed us in class were black and white to begin with, or often terribly faded color, barely giving any hint of the glorious coloristic effects that were supposed to be so important to what we were studying. Descriptions of miniature paintings in books and exhibition catalogs often spent as much time describing the colors readers couldn't see for themselves. He's wearing a blue coat or a green dress, as they did talking about the style and meaning of the images. When color pictures were available, they tended to show the brilliantly colored works of art from the later periods, so that one got the false impression that the early period of Islamic art, like television, was originally in black and white. So for those of us who grew up in America and who had never seen the material firsthand, it was a great experience to travel and emerge from the black and white era of ignorance to the technicolor realms of later Islamic art and architecture. Publishers rarely were nice enough to offer authors the opportunity to illustrate their books and articles with lots of color photographs. And it was only in 1994 that Yale University Press, for example, began publishing their Pelican History of Art series, including our volume on Islamic art, later Islamic art, with significant numbers of color illustrations. In subsequent years, as computers and the internet have transformed publishing, color photographs have become the norm. And Rivers of Paradise, the proceedings of our last symposium, has just been published in entirely glorious color. Nevertheless, scholars did occasionally deal with colorful topics in Islamic art. To give you just one example from my own career, some of my first articles were about the Blue Quran, and I understand we'll see more pictures about the Blue Quran, a manuscript dating from North Africa in the 10th century. Written in gold ink on parchment that's dyed blue. But all the illustrations I could ever reproduce were black and white, and they never gave a sense of the splendor of the original. In my articles, I wondered what contemporary audiences understood the choice of colors to mean, and Lawrence Neese will be exploring these issues in his talk tomorrow. So first of all, we should get a couple of things straight. In all human societies, color, which is the property possessed by an object of producing sensations on the eye as a result of the way in which the object reflects or emits light, color is a cultural construct in the sense that the colors we identify and name are the products of language under the influence of culture. Human societies identify color in various ways. The rainbow, for example, is a universal phenomenon, but many cultures see only 3 colors in it. Others, including our own, have identified as many as 7 colors, although what those 7 colors are, is a matter of some debate. We all learned in school that Sir Isaac Newton identified 7 colors in the continuous spectrum, or rainbow, but what we didn't learn was that he did so because he wanted to harmonize the number of colors that the eye sees with the sounds that the ear hears, the 7 notes of the musical scale. So some cultures don't identify certain colors, such as what we call blue as distinct from what we call green, or orange as distinct from yellow. Indeed, both Persian and Turkish, one word encompasses both blue and green, which parenthetically explains why I always thought the blue mosque looked green or the green mosque looked blue. Modern science understands color in terms of 3 dimensions: hue, what color it is; value, how light or dark, or luminosity; and chroma, the saturation or colorfulness. Some cultures have seen certain colors as going well together, while others have not. Some see yellow and orange as warm colors, compared with the cool colors of blue and green. Most cultures see black and white as colors, but modern science says black is the absence of light and white is its presence. Other cultures, and even we, sometimes distinguish or differentiate dry or matte colors from moist or glossy ones. And I think those of you who are Apple users will know about glossy black and glossy white. In short, given all these differences in the perception of color, we should expect to find that the various Islamic cultures spanning over 1,400 years, from Arabia to Morocco and Mali and to Malaysia and Mongolia, perceived and thought about colors in many different ways. We should expect to find that any one of these ways may have been very different from those we are familiar today. Finally, we must remember that we see the works, images, and colors of the past in lighting conditions very different from those experienced by past societies. Daylight and the torches and oil lamps used centuries ago produce quite different light from that produced by today's incandescent, fluorescent, halogen, and LED lights. As all students of Arabic know, the Arabic language reserves a special verbal form, Form 9, for colors and bodily defects. Linguists have determined that the pre-Islamic Arabic language had 5 basic color terms, which you see on the screen. These words all share the same grammatical form and constitute the oldest stratum of Arabic color terms. There's another form, Form 11, which is even more rare than the color terms, and it's used for very few verbs meaning to turn a particular color. So when you blush, you would use that form. This basic color list illustrates the linguistic theory of basic color terms, which was proposed in 1969 by the scholars Brent Berlin and Paul Kay. All human languages, they argued, use anywhere from 2 to 11 basic color terms, which is an expression in linguistics for what we might call primary color words, which cannot be defined in terms of another color. For example, you can't call blue a shade of yellow, but rose could be defined as a light shade of red. So according to this linguistic theory, all languages start by differentiating light and dark, number 1 and 2, and then add red, always the third color, then green or yellow, then yellow or green, and then blue, and then brown, and then either purple, pink, or orange. The 5 terms in pre-Islamic Arabic, therefore, make it a perfect example of a level 4 language. The important point is that these terms show that the Arabs of pre-Islamic Arabia would not have differentiated blue or purple from green, or orange from red or yellow, except by adding such qualifying terms as light or dark. The Quran, which was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad in the early 7th century of the Common Era, sees color as an attribute of God's creation. The existence of diverse hues, elwan, is mentioned 9 times, most often connected to evidence for God's handiwork in creation. The significance of most color references in the Quran conveys that they are part of the way of appreciating God's creative work in the world. And the Quran says, "Have you not seen how God sends down water from heaven, and therewith to bring forth fruits of diverse hues? And in the mountains, too, are streaks white and red of diverse hues, and pitchy black, men too, and beasts and cattle. Diverse are their hues, mukhtalifa alwaniha." This, of course, this last phrase, has given us the name of this symposium and the beautiful calligraphy by Muhammad Zakaria. The colors mentioned in the Quran, white, black, red, green, and yellow, are those of the pre-Islamic Arabian vocabulary. Blue and brown are noticeably absent from the Quran, although it is inconceivable that the sky wasn't blue or camels weren't brown when it was revealed. The overlap between the concepts of brown, red, and yellow makes the absence of brown less remarkable than than that of blue. As with pre-Islamic Arabic, these words give us some idea of how the Arabs of Muhammad's era would have perceived the colors of the world around them. White and black are often contrasted and constitute a substantial portion of the Quran's color references. White occurs 8 times and 3 times in verbal contexts. In one place, it's the color of creation, set alongside red, black, and many colors, as a description of the colors of the mountains. In another place, white is the quality of the water in paradise and can be understood as a symbol of purity. In 2 other places, white contrasts with black, where the pure believers glow in white and the unbelievers glow in black. Although white often conveys the sense of purity, it also refers to temporary blindness, as in the story of Joseph, when his eyes turn white with sorrow. White and black are understood as referring to light and darkness in the Quran, where one can determine daybreak and the beginning of fasting by one's ability to distinguish a white thread from a dark one. Black appears several times alongside white, but the related word muswad is used twice to suggest the darkening of the face as a reflection of grief. Red is used only once, for the crimson skies of the Day of Judgment, in a related word. And the word rose-colored appears once to describe the color of the sky. Green is used 7 times to convey a sense of freshness and luxuriousness, as in the green garments of silk that the denizens of paradise will wear. Yellow, or golden, asfar, appears 5 times, always negatively, in reference to the yellow wind of sandstorms, to the story of Moses and the golden calf, and to the yellow camels or sparks of hellfire. The root zaraka, from which the common Arabic word for blue derives, appears only once, referring to the sinful blue-eyed people, Zurkan, who will be gathered when the trumpet shall sound. In popular culture, blue eyes are often associated with evil, and oddly enough, the color blue has inauspicious connotations in many Islamic societies. Blue is considered magical and disturbing, a sign of misfortune and of failure. People sometimes avoid saying its name and will say green instead. In Egyptian Arabic and several other dialects, blue strongly connotes evil and misfortune. In Egyptian, you say the equivalent of, are you going to do the blue thing with me? Which means, are you going to play dirty with me? And I think this is why, in some region, people wear blue beads as amulets, or doors are painted blue, because blue is also associated with the power to ward off evil. Black has negative connotations in Arabic. You say to your worst enemy the equivalent of, may God blacken your life, meaning may your life be miserable. And white, conversely, is associated with good and prosperity. One says, may your day be white, and the word full, which refers to the white Arabian jasmine here, is often used as a substitute for white. As in the Egyptian response, in Egypt, sometimes when you say sabah al-khair, somebody comes back to you and says sabah al-ful. And if you ask a tourist guide, they'll always say full being beans. They'll say, may your day be full of beans, which isn't very nice. But what it really means is, may your day be white. May your day be prosperous and bright. One could go on with many such examples. The variety of meanings associated with colors in Islamic societies suggests that many cultural currents were at work. Although the Quran played an important role, we have already seen that the local and regional traditions also played their part. As Arabic culture developed and spread along with Islam, it incorporated and elaborated the folk and scientific knowledge of previous and neighboring civilizations. Early Arab scientists largely followed such ancient authors as Aristotle and Ptolemy in seeing three colors in the rainbow, although the colors they identified, red, green, and yellow, were not the same as the red, green, and blue-violet the ancients saw. Medieval Arab theologians and philosophers did not ignore the subject of color, but they were primarily concerned with the manipulation of theories inherited from the Greeks. They developed no independent doctrine of color, and as far as we know, despite writing on virtually every subject under the sun, from cookery to falconry, nobody wrote a book specifically devoted to the subject of color. In fact, if anyone has found one, I'd be delighted to know. In the written version of this paper, which will be published, we have explored many, many more philosophers, but I'm not going to spend time on that tonight, particularly since I don't have pretty pictures. The 10th century philosophical group known as the Ikhwan as-Safa, the Brethren of Purity, defined color as the brightness of the rays of bodies. The 7 simple colors, white, black, red, yellow, green, blue, and el-Qudra, the dull, we think, maybe violet, appear only on the surface of bodies. White is the manifestation of light in its full purity, while black, which is the absence of light, derives from an earthly humidity that prevents light from reaching vision. The other colors are intermediary between these two extremes. Each is characterized by the amount of white in black it has. Something appears yellow, for example, when an obstacle prevents the light from appearing pure, and red can derive from an excess of humidity or heat. Green comes near to black, and with the dominance of earthly humidity, and blue belongs to the family of green. According to the Ikhwan, God made air blue and plants green to accommodate the interest of his creatures, and consequently, both green and blue are good for vision. The Ikhwan also determined that there were 4 colors in the rainbow: red, yellow, green, and blue. According to their views, each color, as you can see, corresponded to one of the 4 primary qualities, that is heat, dryness, humidity, and cold, as well as to one of the 4 elements of fire, air, earth, and water. Very convenient, very neat. The Persian physician and polymath Ibn Sina, who's known in the West as Avicenna, devoted a chapter of his major work of philosophy to the problems of vision and color. Color, he said, is a quality affecting opaque bodies, which are only potentially colored until affected by light. A colored object will be colorless in the dark as it is deprived of actualized color. And I see you're all deprived of color in the dark. I can't see you. Ibn al-Haytham, who is the father of modern optics, he lived from 965 to 1039, known in the West as Al-Hazan. He wrote the most comprehensive medieval treatise on the subject of optics, the Kitab al-Manazir, which Olga Bush was going to talk about in relationship to the colors used to paint the interior of the Alhambra. Ibn al-Haytham asserted that the colors are as real as light and distinct from it. They exist as forms of the colored objects. It's possible that colors should be capable of extending themselves into the surrounding air in the absence of light, mingled with it. But experiments show that they are always found in the company of light, mingled with it, and that they are never visible without it. So whatever rules apply to light also apply to colors. Unlike his contemporaries, Ibn al-Haytham attempted to study subjective color phenomena and experimented with color mixtures on a spinning disk. In a section on the effects of color contrast, he explored such contrasts only in a tonal context. So, for example, here, to his eye, red spots on a white ground in the upper right seemed black, but they seemed to be white on a black ground. To show their true color, the ground should be gray, as down here. He deemed green on a yellow ground to be simply darker, but not greener or yellower than on a darker ground. And I've shown you the kinds of things he was talking about. Mystics explored color in related but quite different ways, and we'll hear much more about this subject from Samir Mahmood. Perhaps the most famous and beautiful example is that of the Persian poet Nizami Ganjavi. He used 7 colors to structure his classical poem, the Haft Peykar, the 7 portraits or 7 beauties, in which the Sasanian prince, Bahram Gur, who was the personification of the ideal ruler, discovers 7 portraits of 7 princesses, the 7 beauties of the title. Upon accession to the throne, Bahram Gur seeks these princesses out in the 7 climes and installs them in 7 pavilions which are painted 7 different colors. The ruler, having dressed himself, of course, in an appropriate color, then visits a princess on each of the 7 days of the week, and the princesses, who are, of course, under the influence of the 7 planets, recount stories to the ruler. On a prosaic level, this poem is a bedazzling exploration of the pleasures of love, but it can also be interpreted metaphorically as exploring the 7 stages of human life, the 7 aspects of destiny, or the 7 stages of the mystical path. The movement of the hero from the black, therefore the first pavilion, through the different colors to the white and the last pavilion, and of course that's the Persian pavilion, the white one, also represents man's symbolic path from the hidden majesty of the divine to his purity and unity. While Nizami's metaphors of color remains the most famous in Islamic literatures, many other mystics explored the phenomenon of colors and the synchronism between them in the mystic's interior vision. Najmuddin Kubra actually provides a detailed guide to the significance of the fabric color of the Sufi robe as an outward sign of the individual's degree of spiritual advancement. But it's unclear whether such robes were ever actually worn by his own students, let alone adopted by other Sufis. The basic Sufi robe was either black or dark blue to symbolize that the wearer had conquered and slain his carnal soul. By wearing black, he symbolically mourns its loss. The Sufi who has attained the stage of repentance wears a white robe to symbolize the washing away of his worldly concerns. When he's risen above the lower world to continue his mystical journey, he dons a blue robe to symbolize the color of the sky. Finally, if he's completed all the stages of the mystical path and has experienced the lights of all mystical states, he wears a multicolored or variegated robe. Najmuddin's disciple, Saifuddin Bakharzi, who died in 1261, reproduces the same hierarchy, but reverses the white and blue robes, making the blue symbolize the mystic turning away from the physical world. He considered blue to be most appropriate for Sufis in general. Blue, not black, is the color of mourning, symbolizing the world's status as a place of bereavement in which the mystic suffers from being separated from God. It was also the color worn by Qais, nicknamed the madman Majnun, the hero of Nizami's poem, about which Julie Scott Masamy will have much more to say in the coming days. The evolving European approach to color, epitomized by Newton's theory of the 7 colors, had little impact on the Islamic world. But Goethe's attempt at refuting Newton, proposed in his book of 1810, Zur Farbenlehre, found resonance in the writings of the Iranian theosophist al-Kirmani, who died in 1870, and who took up Goethe's theory of physiological colors. Kirmani laid stress on the difference between the existence, the wujud of a color, and its manifestation, zuhur. But he argued that the difference has nothing to do with the classical distinction between a color's potential and actual existence. Kirmani's hermeneutic of colors set in motion a symbolism based on an integral spiritual realism. Color, he argued, is the language of souls. What is striking to us about this brief romp, and I mean very brief romp, through some of the scientific, philosophical, literary, and mystical views of color in the Islamic lands, is how little these views appear to intersect with the physical remains of art and architecture, and more generally with practical knowledge of how colors actually work in the real world. This impracticality tells us something profound about the discontinuity between theory and practice in the arts of the Islamic lands. Scholars have extensively debated the degree to which artisans in the medieval Islamic lands were aware of the geometric and philosophical theories of their contemporaries and have come to very different conclusions. But they have entirely ignored their color theories. An examination of color theories shows that artisans would have been very, very bad artists had they followed the wacky theories of their better educated contemporaries. Apart from somebody like Ibn al-Haytham, no scientist seems to have attempted any practical experiments to see what happened when colors were mixed or placed next to each other. Yet no self-respecting artisan would imagine that mixing a bit of black with white would make red, or that green could be made by changing the proportions of the mix and adding a little more humidity. Only very, very few treatises survive to tell us how artists made and used colors. A treatise on the calligraphic arts by Simi Nishapuri, a 15th century artist, gives plausible recipes for making colored papers and inks. This Timurid librarian begins by explaining it's better to give paper a slight tint because white is hard on the eyes, and the master calligraphic specimens that I've ever observed have all been on tinted paper. And then he says there are many colors. Some non-compound colors or simple colors are yellow, dark red, light red, blue, verdigris, natural, and straw. A few compound colors are blackish, green, rose, dark green, and orange. He then proceeds to explain how to make each of these colors, both simple and compound. To make yellow, for example, you mix saffron strands and water, and after letting the liquid steep in the sun, you strain it into a vessel and store it. To dye paper, yellow, you just dip the paper into the small bath of the liquid. Mixing two colors produced compound colors. Sounds sensible? You produce orange, for example, by mixing saffron, yellow, and water from safflower extract, which is obviously redder. So artists knew what they were doing. Conservators are just beginning to analyze some of the pigments used in the glorious multicolored manuscripts produced in the Islamic lands, and Cheryl Porter will address some of the various economic and geographic constraints that affected artists' choices of colors in such splendid manuscripts as, for example, here, the magnificent Quran codices made for the Mamluks in the late 14th century. Perhaps the most widespread and important practical, indeed scientific application of color was in the production of textiles, which was one of the mainstays of the medieval Islamic economy. Fibers, dyestuffs, mordants, and finished textiles were produced and traded throughout the region. All people in the region were passionate about brilliant and variegated colors in their dress and furnishings. For example, a letter from one trader to another asked, "May I please have 5 fine covers, 1 colored gazelle blood, 1 colored pure violet, 1 musk colored, 1 silvery, 1 intense yellow, 2 others pure clean white, but with a little bit of yellow." Well, another letter says, "The red should be as red as possible. Likewise, the white and the yellow should be exquisite." He writes, I was not satisfied with the yellow, so improve it. The cycloton robe is of the utmost beauty, but not exactly what I wanted, for it is white and blue, while I wanted to have, instead of that, onion color, an open color. The lead-colored robe is superb, better than all the rest. From studying trousseau lists and related documents, the historian Shlomo Goitein was able to come up with a list of favorite colors in medieval Egypt. White was the most popular, followed by blue, green, red, black, and yellow. Many shades of white were mentioned in the documents he looked at: snow, pearl, pale, cloud, silver, lead, borax, starch, and white asparagus white. The popularity of blue, which we've seen was widely believed to be inauspicious, is somewhat surprising, but blue came in such varieties as sky-colored, iridescent, and turquoise. Nevertheless, the importance of blue is underscored by the widespread popularity of indigo dye, which works equally well on linen and wool, the two fibers most commonly used in the region, although it's here on silk. Indigo, whose name reveals its Indian origin, was known in Arabic as anil, from which our word aniline derives. The finest reds were produced from Brazil wood and kermes or cochineal, which has given us our word crimson. We'll hear much more about red from Shreve Simpson, who will explore the sources and shades of red used throughout Islamic art to better understand its meanings, associations, and values. From the Geniza merchants, dyeing represented more than a quarter of the final cost of the fabric. The price of the coloring matter was more than 4 times the wages of the dyers. John Thompson will discuss how dyers were able to manipulate colors to produce pleasing and harmonious combinations. From the Geniza merchants, dyeing represented more than a quarter of the final cost of the fabric. The price of the coloring matter was more than 4 times the wages of the dyers. John Thompson will discuss how dyers were able to manipulate colors to produce pleasing and harmonious combinations, particularly in carpets. For Muslims, the magical transformations wrought by the dyer had religious overtones. Observers knew that dyes were veils or vessels which color the water according to their own hue, and that to change the color meant also to change one's character. The great poet Jalaluddin Rumi tells the story of a jackal who dumped into a dyeing vat in order to reach a higher rank. The final goal is the vat of unicoloricity, usually referred to by the Quranic term of Sabqat Allah, the coloring of God. God is compared to a dyer who finally dyes everything in his own color, that is, the invisible radiant light. And once his state has been reached, color distinctions are bound to disappear. This concept inspired the Iranian filmmaker Majid Majidi to produce his 2000 masterpiece, Rangi Khoda, known in English as The Color of Paradise, about a blind boy's search for God. White clothes, of course, played a special role in Islam. The ihram garments worn by pilgrims on the Hajj are 2 lengths of seamless white cloth, although the Quran does not actually say anything about them. The Prophet Muhammad is said to have worn a white cotton shirt under his woolen cloak, and in subsequent centuries, the wearing of plain white cotton and linen, particularly in contrast to the multicolored silks identified with pre-Islamic Iran, connoted a sense of deep piety. Several traditions of the Prophet speak of his attachment to white garments, such as, "The best of your clothes are the white ones, and God loves white clothing, and he created paradise white," although other reports state that Muhammad also wore red, green, and black. Muslims were normally buried in white shrouds, although any color except red was acceptable. The libertine Umayyad Caliph, Al-Walid II, is reported to have worn clean and white garments, implying that they were not dyed. In contrast, the pious Caliph, Suleiman, is reported to have worn a green coat and a matching turban, showing that there was no consistency of meaning to color in the Umayyad period. Specifically, the color green did not yet have the connotation that it would later gain as the mark of descent from the Prophet. The sharif, or descendant's right to wear a green turban, was enunciated only in 14th century Egypt. Green turbans are common today as signs of descent from the Prophet, and contemporary Iranians have adopted the same green as a powerful symbol of resistance to the re-election of President Ahmadinejad. The Abbasid revolt against the Umayyad caliphs began with black-clad warriors unfurling black banners, since the coming of the Messiah was to be heralded by a man carrying a black banner. Not unsurprisingly, black became the dynastic color of the Abbasids. The first rebellion against the Abbasids featured white banners, and white became associated with the opposition, which traced its lineage not only to the founder of the Umayyad house, but also to an Arab tribal Messiah, and eventually ended up in being white, ended up in being the color of the Fatimid caliphs of Egypt. The Abbasid courtier, Hilal al-Sabi, wrote a manual on the rules and regulations of the Abbasid court. The caliph was supposed to wear a long-sleeved garment dyed black, with an outer garment either plain or embroidered with white silk or wool. Multicolored brocaded silk was considered inappropriate. He also wore a black turban on his head and red boots on his feet. I'd like red boots. Abbasids of rank appearing before him were to wear black, while descendants of the Medinese supporters of Muhammad, the Ansar, should wear yellow garments and turbans. Military commanders and officers should also wear black, but those of lower rank were prohibited from wearing black, although they were free to choose other colors, as long as, he said, quote, they do not abandon all restraint, indulge in vulgarity, and forget the primary rules of etiquette, end quote. The kiswa, or cloth covering the Kaaba in Mecca, is nowadays always made of black silk with gold embroidery, but that was not always the case. Sometimes it was white linen, and at other times it was made of multicolored silk cloth from Iraq or Iran. The Abbasid Caliph al-Mahdi replaced the old Umayyad kiswas with 3 new ones of Coptic silk, floss silk, and brocade. The Caliph Harun al-Rashid ordered a kiswa of white Egyptian linen, while his successor, al-Ma'mun, sent 3 kiswas, the first made of red brocade, the second of Egyptian silk, and the third of white brocade. Nevertheless, black eventually became the standard color. A negative attitude towards yellow was one of the most consistent in Islamic societies, but even so, there was wide variation. We've just heard how certain people were supposed to, honored people were supposed to wear yellow. Yellow, which is a dye is most easily produced from saffron crocus, has largely negative connotations in the Quran, as I said, and the Prophet felt that it was inappropriate for men's clothing, although it was not forbidden to women. In about 850, the Abbasid Caliph al-Mutawakkil ordered that non-Muslims had to wear honey-colored, that is yellow, scarves and belts, since the Prophet did not like that color. In Andalusian Arabic poetry, yellow was a symbol of treachery, of separation from the beloved, and of unrequited love, causing the suitor to languish to death. However, the Mamluk author Al-Kalkashandi reports that the mahmal, or ceremonial litter, which was sent on a camel from Egypt to Mecca every year, was covered in yellow satin. So clearly opinions varied. We've also seen how the Abbasids and the Fatimids used colored banners to identify themselves, and Maribel Fierro will tell us more about how the war of colors played out in the medieval Muslim West. But just in case you're thinking this all happened a long time ago, color concerns are still alive and well, to judge from the flags developed for the Islamic countries of the contemporary world. Green, for many, the color of Islam, is the predominant color in the flags of Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Pakistan. And the green flag has been associated with the Wahhabi movement since the 18th century. Turkey, in contrast, has a bright red flag, which is derived from the red flag of the Ottoman Empire. It too has inspired the flag designs of many other Muslim countries. And in contrast to these monochrome flags, multicolored flags are also popular. White, black, red, and green which are incidentally the first four of the basic color terms I mentioned earlier, are the so-called pan-Arab colors, which are used for the flags of many Arab countries. And they all derive, as you can see, from the flag of the Great Arab Revolt in the early 20th century. One could go on and on with other flags. But let's return to art. Many examples of the arts made in the Islamic times are made from materials that were prized for their inherent color. Gemstones, such as rubies, emeralds, and pearls, were prized, as well as hard stones, such as turquoise, lapis lazuli, and jade, whether for their inherent color or for their supposedly curative properties. Copper and its alloys could range from golden brass and bronze to silvery high-tin bronze. While these colors were often enjoyed for themselves, from the 11th century, metalsmiths also developed the art of inlaying one metal into another to write inscriptions and paint figural scenes and abstract vegetal and geometric designs, as you can see on this little sprinkler. Well, refined metal ores had the potential to produce vivid coloristic effects themselves. The natural colors of the clays from which bricks and ceramics were made seem to have rarely been appreciated for themselves. Masterful examples of brickwork, for example, from the Islamic period, rely on these humble materials. But from a very early period, however, potters adopted the ancient Near Eastern technique of glazing, or covering the surface of a porous ceramic vessel with a thin layer of glass to make their vessels impervious to liquids and also make them more attractive. Potters liked colored glazes made by adding different minerals to the glaze. Copper oxide gives a green color to a lead glaze and a turquoise blue color to an alkaline one. Ferric oxide gives an orange or yellow color to a lead glaze, and under reducing or low oxygen conditions, it becomes ferrous oxide, which gives it a pale green color. Other coloring agents included manganese, which produces a violet or blackish brown, antimony, and arsenic. Green or turquoise monochrome glazed wares, as you see in the upper left, were probably only second in popularity to unglazed wares, but these utilitarian wares are rarely found in museum displays. For fancier wares, potters in the early Islamic period sometimes combined colors on a single piece, as you can see on the lower left. From about the 12th century, the deep blue produced from cobalt became increasingly popular in the region, from Syria and Anatolia to Afghanistan and Central Asia, whether used alone or in combination with other colors. During the 13th and 14th century, a new type of cobalt blue luxury ware decorated with black, red, white, and gold was developed, as you see on the left. This new taste for dark blue also coincided with the increased production and export of Chinese blue and white wares, initially made with Iranian cobalt, to the Islamic lands of Central and West Asia, where they were in turn imitated by local potters. In Iran, from the 12th century, builders introduced turquoise-colored end plugs into monochrome brickwork, followed by glazed turquoise strips and terracotta. By the early 13th century, two additional colors, white and the dark cobalt blue, were introduced. The development of a complete or uninterrupted surface of multicolored tiles, which was to become a hallmark of architecture in Iran and Central Asia in the later periods, took place in the middle of the 13th century. The technique was not simply an elaboration of earlier practice, but a transformation of it, as the decorator had to change from a direct to an indirect process. All of these techniques are used on the beautiful facade here of the Little Shrine Complex at Natanz. By the late 14th and early 15th century, large surfaces were entirely covered under a glittering web of deep blue tiles, accented with splashes of turquoise, white, black, green, yellow, red, and the tan of the unglazed brick to recreate the haftrang, or the seven colors, beloved in Persian poetry. The expense of this difficult mosaic technique led artisans to develop two different ways of simultaneously producing colored effects, putting different colors on single tiles. The cuerda seca technique produced less brilliant colors than did underglazed painting, and this technique, the latter, underglazed painting, became particularly popular in the Ottoman Empire. Bernard O'Kane, will tell us about the development of these techniques and the transfer of technology between Iran and Anatolia in the 15th century. On the interiors of buildings, these tiled revetments were often supplemented by paint, a relatively fragile medium that survives only on very protected surfaces. Here, tiles and paint were combined, and Noha Sadiq will present the examples of the brilliantly painted Rasulid buildings that have survived in the Yemen. Another way of adding color to a building was with colored stones, a technique that was particularly popular in India. Builders exploited the bright colors of the natural red stone, perhaps because the Turkish rulers associated red with royalty, using it for parasols and canopies over the ruler. Here, for example, the Sultan of Delhi, Ghiyath ad-Din Tughlaq, carefully chose to use dressed red sandstone for his royal tomb. In North Africa and Spain, different techniques and a different palette developed. Deep blue was rarely used in ceramics or tiles until relatively late, probably because the region was so far from the traditional sources of cobalt in Iran. In contrast to the Iranian world, where azure blue domes are characteristic, the tiled roofs of Western Islamic architecture are invariably green from a copper-based glaze. Finally, in addition to the buildings themselves, individuals in the Islamic lands manipulated the natural colors of the environment around them, most notably through the creation of lushly colored gardens. We can get some idea of what these gardens were like in earlier times from contemporary poetry and painting, as well as through carpets. Manu Sobti and Mohammed Gharipur will talk about reconstructing the colors of Persian gardens. This passion for color in the Islamic world passed from the Islamic lands to its neighbors and descendants. From Spain, here, it passed to the New World in such media as colored tiles, decorated window ceilings, and the ornamentation of doorways and windows. Michael Schreffler is going to go beyond these physical survivals to examine how ideas of color, created in the Castilian encounter with Islam, framed the Spanish conqueror's perception of the New World. Cortes, the conquistador, for example, described the Aztec marketplace where they sell cotton threads of so many colors that it seems like the silk market of Granada. In short, color played an extraordinary, important role throughout Islamic art and beyond. Of course, you knew all of this before we came to this meeting tonight, but what we hope you've learned this evening are some of the regional, temporal, and material variations in the ways that Muslims and members of Muslim societies perceived and used color over the past 1,400 years. There is no one Islamic attitude towards color. Philosophers and sciences made contributions to the study of color, but the greatest contributions, we believe, were made by artists and craftsmen, many of them whose names remain anonymous to us today. We hope that you will join us for 2 stimulating days of talks by the best and the brightest scholars in the field. We welcome your participation in this exciting event and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Now, just a few announcements before we depart. Un par de anuncios breves antes de salirnos. First off, everyone this evening, everyone present, is invited to a dinner at Bodegas Campos, and buses are waiting outside to take people there and return. Todos, los presentes están cordialmente invitados a una cena ahora en el restaurante Bodegas Campos. Y hay autobuses fuera para transportarnos allí y luego para la vuelta. Tomorrow we will resume at 9 a.m. at Palacios Congreso for day 1. Thank you. For day 1 of the sessions, where the first paper of the symposium will be delivered by Dr. Olga Bush, entitled Designs Always Polychromed or Gilded, the Aesthetics of Color in the Alhambra. Mañana volveremos a empezar a las 9 de la mañana en Palacios Congresos para iniciar las sesiones, cuando la primera ponencia del simposio se dará por la doctora Olga Bush, titulado Los diseños siempre policromados, la estética del color en la Alhambra. Y finalmente quisiera reconocer dos miembros de nuestro Consejo de Directores de la Universidad de Virginia Commonwealth que están aquí presentes con nosotros. And finally, I would like to recognize two members of our Board of Visitors from Virginia Commonwealth University who are with us this evening. And may I please ask them to stand, por favor, que se pongan de pie. Penny Rhodes, our rector, and G.C. Morse, Mr. G.C. Morse. Muchas gracias, muy buenas noches. Thank you and good evening.